So today I want to gripe about tubeless, specifically tubeless for road, and also talk about my method, which is guaranteed not to make a giant mess. Maybe, and there will be goldfish. So first of all, I got a giant hole in this tire. I tried my best to repair this guy, but the gash is just big enough to where when I pressurize this tire up to like 75, 80 PSI, it'll seal for like a minute or two, and then it will start to seep. And in the middle of the night, this came flying out and shot sealant all over the room and made a giant mess. It's time to be replaced. So I guess that's really con number one, is if you have thin tires, you have thin tires, whether they're tubeless or tubed. They're gonna be thin, they're gonna rip, they're gonna tear, and especially these Vittoria tires are some of the thinnest tires on the market. Expect a few gashes and tears, and tubeless will make it last a little bit longer, or at least that's been my experience, but you don't get a ton of life out of these tires to begin with, so don't expect to get more life out just because they're tubeless. Though with some tires you will get a tiny bit more lifetime out of them if you're running tubeless versus running with tubes. But it also depends on where you ride and how you ride. For reference, I put about 2,000 miles on this, that number of kilometers, which is a little less than I would have liked to have gotten out of this tire, but it's not terrible considering how thin the casing is. I also ride on absolutely terrible roads here in New England, so it is what it is. Which I guess leads me into another con, that it's been my experience that there are really only two types of punctures slash flats that you get with tubeless. You either get the little tiny ones, you know, they just kind of spray out for a minute and then they seal and you just pump it up and you're pretty much good to go. And then you get the catastrophic ones where it just tears all the way across the tire, and it wouldn't matter if you had tubes, if you were tubeless, or if you just happened to carry a giant slab of rubber in your pocket, you're not gonna repair it. So let's see if we can change this tire for this one and hopefully not make a ginormous mess. Fingers crossed. All right, so my method is roughly this. We're gonna try and remove the tire as nicely as we can without making a giant mess, and use this syringe to try and extract as much of the sealant as we can before we remove the tire. Clean up the tire with some paper towels, get everything ready to go, and then we're gonna try and mount the new tire onto this rim, but without sealant, using a CO2 inflator. So we're just gonna take these are just a standard, this is not the non-screw type, and just the cheapest CO2 inflator that I could get that would take these standard cartridges. And we're gonna blast that rim without sealant, seat it onto the rim, and then fill it with sealant. Hopefully not make a ginormous mess. Break that bead. All right, got a gap. Let's see if we can get some of that sealant out. When that plug flew out, it must have shot the majority of the sealant all over the room. Awesome. Well, in that case, this would have functioned great. Could have sucked that out, put it back in there, wouldn't have made a huge mess. We'll just pull this guy out. Also, if you don't have these aren't paper towels, they're shop towels. They're basically like regular paper towels, except they stay together a little bit better. You can get them wet and you can really be aggressive with them and they don't fall apart. And they're also really great for cleaning chains. So far, no drops have spilled. Totally did not spill any on here. All right, moving on to the second part. Let's try and get this tire seated on this rim, but with no sealant. Also, to look extra pro, make sure you line up your logos on your tires with the logos on your rim. It does take a bit of wrestling, but you should be able to get the bead over the rim of this tire without having to use tire levers. You just gotta make sure that you get the bead in the center of the rim track on this side and then kind of maneuver it over the top of the rim. This is the other part of the technique which helps, is just pulling the tire like this. Ooh, almost there. Ah, there we go. Never used these. So you just gotta get the tire sort of lined up roughly in the middle, more or less. Also, be sure to check your valve when you're changing a tire. Make sure that air's getting through here. Sometimes sealant can get up into the valve and clog these guys. It's good to just unscrew it, check it, make sure that it's still good. All right, so moment of truth. Does my CO2 inflator function the way it's supposed to? It's best to do this all in one big shot, so just the whole container all at once. 3, 2, 1. It did in fact seat onto the rim, but it actually ended up pulling the whole valve core out. Whoops. Also, you see how the valve is slightly offset from where the bottom would be? That's intentional because as you fill, it's gonna run down. If you fill this directly with this facing down, after you pull the syringe off, it's gonna force the sealant back out. So just give it a little angle and we'll just clip. Another tip, always shake your sealant first. For 28mm tubeless, I put about 40 milliliters, just less than an ounce and a half. You can put a little more, but I find this is enough, and you definitely have to check it every couple of months. When I pull this off, you see a little burp. Ooh. Okay, so I lied. We spilled 1, 2, 3 drops. Once you got it sealed up, gotta give it a good shake. Really make sure you get the sealant all the way around the rim. Another potential con for tubeless tires is they tend to leak a little bit. So you can actually see. So this isn't oil that's seeping out. This is actually glycerol. Tubeless tire sealants are actually made up of 2 components. There's the liquid latex and then a glycerol/glycol. And the liquid latex dries out really fast. The glycerol and the glycol is there to help it from stopping drying out too fast. So that way it remains sort of liquidy until the two are separated. So when there's a puncture, you can see this like glycerol is squeezing through the tiniest of tiny gaps, and then as soon as the liquid latex comes through, it solidifies and plugs that hole. At least that's the theory anyway. But every so often you have to clean up this extra glycerol that has seeped through the tire. It's kind of annoying, but it doesn't harm anything. It ends up just collecting a lot of dirt, actually. So final thoughts on tubeless. While I will say that running tubeless, if you have rims and tires and everything already equipped for running tubeless, it's generally a pretty cheap process, or at least it's cheap in relation to running tubes. However, tools like this, in order to get you out of a pinch, are actually more expensive than if you were to just carry tubes and like a little mini pump. Do the pros outweigh the cons for tubeless for road in this case? Because it is pretty messy, it does require some maintenance, but I would argue that if you're running latex tubes, that running tubeless is almost a no-brainer, because you have to check on latex tubes just as much as you would your tubeless setup, and you get that added pinch flat protection. Plus the improved rolling resistance, I think makes tubeless worth it for the road, but everybody has to weigh out the pros and cons themselves. It's actually not tea anymore, it's just water. So if you made it all the way to the end, thank you for watching. Let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see some other maintenance type stuff, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Thank you.